I don't want it. I don't want it. And I look at her and I said, I'm going to choose one of two things today. I look at her and I said, I'm either going to quit medical school today or I'm going to kill myself. I know exactly what I'm saying. I am of sound mind. I am very aware. I have all the agency. I said, if I leave today, I'm going to walk into traffic.
This episode of Be Empowered does come with a trigger warning. We're going to be talking about depression, suicidality, self harm, and other mental health topics. If you or someone you know is struggling with this, please know that you're not alone. In the United States, and 988 is the crisis helpline. We're also going to put some resources specific for healthcare workers in our caption. Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. Now, on to the episode. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Be Empowered, the podcast. This is a podcast where we dive into the realities of healthcare and entrepreneurship. We offer our opinion, unfiltered, unapologetic, and always with a dose of empowerment. We're here to amplify voices, both yours and ours, challenge the status quo, and explore what it really means to thrive. So let's get into it. I'm Dr. Santoshi Bulakota.
And I'm Dr. Shala Mokbel.
And today we have Javi Ochoa, a very special guest. Javi made the difficult decision to leave medical school in his third year after recognizing the significant toll it was taking on his mental health. Since then, he has transitioned into a non clinical career and has become an advocate for mental health. Through his social media platform, he shares the often unspoken challenges of being a medical student and a healthcare provider. He offers support, hope, and valuable mental health resources. He also empowers students and trainees to consider alternative paths and reminds them that stepping away can be an act of strength, not failure. Thanks so much for coming on to the podcast. We really appreciate it. I think what you're doing on social media and overall is just very valuable, especially because, like I was telling you offline, I wish we had something like this while we were in medical school and we just didn't have enough people speaking up. So, do you want to give a little bit more introduction on yourself, your journey, and what you're doing now?
Yeah, no, definitely. And also, thank you both for that very warm introduction. Darius, I feel like I'm answering the big question. So tell me about yourself. But yeah, of course, so kind of to the listener, hi, my name's Javi. And before I start, like anything that I discuss here, my intention is never ever to convince you about choosing anything. I'm really just going to present, my experiences through my lens, just as a different perspective. And, if you decide that medicine is where you want to be at, I love it. And if you decide it's not, even awesome too. So, but yeah, kind of a bit myself, I went to medical school. I got into medical school. I applied twice, and I was really proud because I got in with a 3.1 GPA. I got an early acceptance to a Texas MD school, and it was really because years ago, in college, I did try taking my life. I got hospitalized, my sophomore year in college, and that's when that's even how I started my first my med school application essay, where the cops came to my therapist's office at Southern Methodist University, put handcuffs on me, and took me to the ER because I become a danger to myself. And as you can tell, I've always been very forward about, living yourself authentically. And that's kind of what I knew helped me get into medical school despite the obvious hurdle. And then when I was in medical school, that's why I loved it. I loved the first 2 years. Like I was my friends used to make a joke because I was always an anti-gunner person, but my friends who were very gunnery, they're like, "Javi, you're kind of a low-key gunner because in terms of extracurriculars, I love doing everything because that's what filled my cup." Also, having gone to, I'll talk about this more in my story, but I really just leveraged, going to a pass-fail school with a pass-fail step one to just do experiences that I loved. And things I'll talk about later on in the in the podcast. But long story short, I realized at a point that I didn't love it anymore, and as hard as that was, I knew that at that point it was the right choice for me. Fast forward to now, like I'm so excited. I just started my new job 2 weeks ago as a qualified crisis behavioral professional, and tomorrow's Monday is my first day on the job solo, and it's crazy to just be like, wow, I'm the decider. Like I say that jokingly, but also understanding the weight of that. Like I'm going to understand these patients who, these adult patients who live in a crisis center 24 hours, who have these intellectual and developmental disabilities, who go to these crisis states. For the listener, crisis meaning like they get so upset that they're going to kill you. They're going to come after you with a knife. And my job is to understand what leads to that event and what is the setting event or the cause, and then think of behavioral plans to do that. But a lot of stuff I can obviously talk about, but that's kind of a quick intro to me.
So, can you tell us what was the breaking point for you in medical school when you realized that staying in medicine was no longer sustainable for you?
Oh yes, of course. So when did it happen? So it was so let's paint the picture, the clinical setting. So it was my third rotation in my third year. So it was the third week of my rotation in internal medicine, and I left on a Wednesday. But let's start on that Sunday. Honestly, that Sunday, what was happening? I was exhausted. I hated everything. I literally just hated everything. And what was I doing? I was on the phone crying to my parents. And my parents, immigrant background. My dad was a migrant worker. Now they're both citizens, but I have that immigrant background, where it's like I was ready to be that change in my family's trajectory. But I was yelling to my parents about how much I hated it. It was screaming at midnight. And what did my mom do? My mom just starts begging. She starts telling me in Spanish, like, please, please quit. Like, we hate seeing you. They're like, you're suffering. You're not, we don't like seeing you suffer over. And they knew, I would always say practice problems. They knew it was because of you world. And what did I do the second they said that? I started yelling back, saying, how dare you? I started yelling, how dare you tell me to quit something I clawed my way through? I was yelling at them. Unfairly so. I was like, how dare you just ask me to quit something you will never understand, right? I felt so insulted. And what did I say? I love it. In the middle of all the screaming, I kept on saying, I love it, which looking back, it was a lie. Because what happened that Wednesday? So that Tuesday before, again, I'm at clinic, cardiology elective, only medical student, on the elective. They're not even going to grade me. I'm not getting evaluated. So I'm like, why am I here? I should be studying. So I show up that morning. Me and the resident were waiting for the attending. And she asked me, hey, Javi, do you want to see this patient? I'm on my iPad on Grinder. I look up and I say, nah, I'm good. And that's it. And imagine I say that to you while I'm your third year medical student. Imagine I look at you and I say, nah. And that's it. And when she walked away, I looked up and I said, what did I just do? Because I was like, what? That's not me. That's not what I do. It was so weird to me. And then the next day, so the day it happened, the next day, I wake up and I'm like, I'm not going to go to clinic. It's stupid. No one cares. Why am I there? I'm wasting my time. I need to study. Then I get a text from the dean. So at this point, because I had failed my PED shelf exam, which was the first one, then my family, which we'll probably talk about that more later, but my family shelf exam, the second one, I was having a lot of student conduct meetings, which those of you who don't understand is so freaking stressful in medical school. Even hearing the phrase is a death sentence, which it shouldn't be, right? Considering it's because I was failing and trying. And that was it. I was done with it. I was over it. I hated it. I was like, I don't want this anymore. And so I go to the dean, I go to my meeting, I opened the door and she was like, hey, Javi. She's so great, by the way. And I opened the door. She's like, hey, Javi, how are you? I look at her and I said, I hate life. She says, well, okay, close the door. And then so I just explain everything, right? I just explain everything. And then she was in a very interesting situation. I could tell she was trying her best to work with where I was at, but she phrased it this way. And I took this in a very funny way. She was like, Javi, I can tell you're going through a lot. And I really am sorry you're going through this. And she says, but I'm going to make your day a little worse now. And I said, let me have it. Because I knew there was something. And yeah, there was the code of conduct issues. Apparently, it was so annoying. It was just so annoying. Just, it's like, they were worried about my anxiety. And also, it's just a lot of things that just came up. Like on a TikTok live one time, I was so sad over a patient that passed that I was following. This guy who was like my age, and long story short, he just passed, came in healthy, migrant guy, his whole family's in another country, and he just died, and that's it. And that's it. My age. And I'm like, that's so unfair. Like, that's so unfair that like I can live an amazing life and this guy can't. And and because I shared that, someone on social media complained about it. And so I was like, you know what? I don't want it. I was like, I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it. And I look at her and I said, I'm gonna choose one of two things today. I look at her and I said, I'm either going to quit medical school today or I'm going to kill myself. I know exactly what I'm saying. I am of sound mind. I am very aware. I have all the agency. I said, if I leave today, I'm going to walk into traffic. If I leave today, I have no shortage of pills I can take. I'm prepared to take them. It wouldn't be my first time. And I told her, I know what I'm saying. I know what happens next. I know what I'm saying. And I know what's going to happen to me because I've been in this situation. Fast forward. Crisis thing happened. Amazing physicians who came to help me, who knew me so well. I get expedited inpatient psych. And then what happens when you're there? You get evaluated, right? You get evaluated by someone who doesn't know you, who doesn't know the clinical medicine of it, who doesn't know all the nuance. They just evaluate you. And so as I'm speaking to her, this person is so kind, so great. I asked her, hey, like, what do you think is going to happen? And what did she tell me? She was like, well, I'm not the doctor, but, based off of what I've seen before, it seems like the doctor is going to recommend you get admitted, right? And of course, I take that as a prison sentence, which it shouldn't be. But then I ask her, like, and what if I refuse? And then she says, blah, blah, a third party. And I'm like, a third party. And I said, you mean a cop who doesn't have near the education I have, isn't as smart as I am, doesn't know me, doesn't know the nuance of the system, who doesn't know anything about the clinical medicine, is going to decide to a medical student who's advocated for mental health his own fate? That's how it's going to work. And that's when I realized I don't want to kill myself. I'm so happy. I'm a perfect, amazing, awesome guy. And then I look at the lady and I'm like, can I just be so candid? And there's some girl she was training, and I look at her and I'm like, watch this. And I just scream. I scream as loud as I can. I just scream and I say, I don't want to kill myself. I have a perfect life. I just hate medical school. And that was it. And that's when I realized that's what I just had to say. I just hated medical school. And then when I got discharged, I called my parents. My dad was like, "Hey, man," in Spanish. He was like, screw that, that career. Like those letters don't mean anything. Let's just come home." And when I walked out, I was so free. But there's a lot more that we'll talk about. But yeah, that's really how it all happened. So here we are.
Thank you so much for sharing that and being so vulnerable about it. I giggled a little bit when you said you whirled because the first time I ended up on anxiety medications was studying for step one.
Oh,
You whirled just, oh my God. And just like you, my parents were incredibly supportive through all of it. But I felt kind of very alone because
yeah.
I don't know if anyone else was going through that, right? But it was just such a stressful time. Do you feel like for you, like the stress was from like the studying and all of the rotations and the long hours, or do you think it was more like the toxic culture? What kind of led up to that breaking point? Like I have had enough.
Yeah, I can definitely walk you through what went on through my mind because it was an active decision. So I'm in the dean's room again, right? And she just explained everything, and I was quiet. I wasn't responding. Oh, because here's also what happened really quick. This is still important because she says, Javi, there's more I want to tell you, but I don't want to tell you it. And I said, oh, no, you're going to tell me because if you don't, I'm going to lose my mind now. And she told me, I was like, no, you're telling, I was like, I'm not asking you. You're telling me now because you're not going to withhold anything from me because I need to know what I need to decide. And that's when I had to actually think. So what did I consider? So first, studying was never an issue for me because I always loved it. I loved what I was learning. And then also the work was never an issue for me. I was published. I went to four national conferences before the second semester of my second year. I was published five times. I created so many things because I had so much. Why? Because I had my friends. For me, it was my friends and my social life that let me just be everything I wanted to be. And when I was considering in that moment where I was at, I said, I'm lonely. I lost all my friends because they moved on because I took a year off after step one. And we can, I'm sure we'll talk about that too. But I lost my friends because I went off cycle. And then the toxicity. Well, of course, it's always toxic. For example, it was so annoying when oh my God, I was trying so hard in my rotation, my third rotation, to just have some semblance of dignity and pride in my work still. So I obviously cared a lot about my patients because at least my evaluations were good, right? I went through up to date so hard on this patient. I had my presentation, action, and plan ready for the attending. This is the director of the rotation, right? So I would imagine someone who is invested in my education. As I start my action and plan, I look at her. She wasn't playing Pokemon Go. Playing Pokemon Go while I'm here hoping that she validates me somehow. I look at it, I'm like, why am I wasting my breath? So instead of saying this long thing, I said blah, 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 and I'm done. You know what she says? She doesn't even look at me. She looks at the resident and says, what you got? And I'm like, okay. This resident didn't know what she was doing. And obviously, she didn't know how to answer any questions that I was very prepared to even address beforehand. She asked the resident two questions. The resident said, I don't know. And I'm like, well, I have it written here, but I'm stupid. I don't know what I'm doing. And then she's like, oh, this is a good idea. And the attending says, oh, that's a good idea. I'm like, yeah, because I read being up to date and I had it right here, but no one else reads. And so, of course, that was also something I considered. And I considered the fact we don't, like, how do you actually help? Consider you're in peds. What are you doing? You're in nursery. You're having these new families. And in one room, you have this amazing, it's important to note for the picture, amazing white couple, amazing white couple. Mom is so happy, family's in the room. It's a party. It's a beautiful moment, right? Then in the literally next wall, it's the opposite. When you walk in, what do we see? Lights are off. Mom, Hispanic, small, exhausted, just so frail, emaciated. And then you see the baby in the crib just silently sleeping. Mom is dead, not literally, but she's exhausted. Then then you see the dad in the back, not with the presents. No, he is in the back begging his job for more hours because he doesn't know how to afford this big mistake. Because that's a thing. Sometimes it's a mistake, and that's okay to acknowledge. But what does the stupid attending do? Walks in, congratulations. Like, are you an idiot? Like, do you not see what this is? This is a terrible time for her. This isn't something to celebrate. And that lack of intentional empathy pissed me off. To which you would say, well, Javi, what should you say? I'd be like, just ask the person, how do you feel about this? It's super simple. Just humanize their emotions. And so all these things, apart from the exhaustion, the fact that I saw myself merely as a student, I was no longer a person. I was living a perpetual life of waking up at 3:30 in the morning to study, to review everything as well as my patients before being there at 6:30, to leave at 7 p.m. thinking, can I eat? Like, can I sit? Is that a crime? I've given the system everything about me. I have given them my joy. I have been the most, when I was in medical school, and all my friends who would listen to this, they know I did everything for everyone. I was everywhere. I was class leadership, everything. And just to be forgotten, my friends never spoke to me when I went off cycle ever again. I never talked to them again. No one cared about me. So I thought, why do I still care about this stupid white coat? And when all those physicians came to me and tried to help me, I told them to their faces, "Oh, you're all a bunch of fakers. You lie to yourselves." Because I was so upset because I felt so betrayed. Obviously, I processed it, but that hopefully that answered your question.
So during this whole like time period, did you ever request accommodations from your school? Like I know you mentioned you took a year off. Was that the school's decision, or did you kind of advocate for that time off?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I hate that, even this topic to some might still be taboo, which it shouldn't be, right? But no, so first my answer as no at first. I didn't need, during my first year, it's also relevant. I did get diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder October of my first year in 2020. And even then, despite that and the drama of medical school, which I think a lot of people could agree, sometimes it's like high school for some reason still. But even with all that in, I was still, fine for myself up until third year, up until rotations. I mean, sorry, step one dedicated. Because yes, I was exhausted. I was so burnt out. I went to school that had a 99% pass rate. Why was that? Because the cutoff to be allowed to take step one was, above the pass rate, right? So they pushed us. So you had to postpone. I had to postpone my step one 3 times to finally be able to take it. At that point, I was exhausted. And I was like, so I spoke to my school. I said, hey, what would be a better option for me? Because I wanted to apply to a competitive specialty. I was setting my resume up for that, right? So I said, what would be better for me to continue on cycle as I am now or take a year off? And even then, let's think about that really quick. Instead of me thinking about me being burnt out and hating myself and the fact that I've cried for the last 3 months, I'm still thinking about my future resume. I'm still thinking, wait, okay, but I need to still do away rotation. So that's more important than my mental health. I just think that's something for the listener to also consider. But anyway, I digress. So yes, the school was very supportive. They said, "Hey, that might be a good idea," and they're even like encouraging me so much. So I took a year off, and that was it. I took a year off, and I thought that was going to be the right call. Turns out, looking back, that might have been a bad choice for me without me even realizing why. Because when I got off cycle, what happened? I no longer am a medical student. So my friends continued on to third year and I did not. I'm not going to reach out to my friends because I know they're busy. I'm very considerate. I don't want to stress them out. My problems, I was like, I'm not going to add more problems to them. I'm sure they're so tired. And I never saw my friends again. I just literally never did. And then I started third year. And I'm a very extroverted person. I have no problems making friends. But what sucked about, and I thought in third year, that's fine. Like, I can still make friends. Like, that's not an issue. But I didn't realize no one ever told you how lonely it is, like how truly lonely it can be. Because not I did not have the proximity nor physical time to actually even make a relationship. And oftentimes, this is good of my school. Like we have a very low physician to student ratio, which is good, right? But then it's like, who do I talk to? Like who can I complain to? I don't even know anyone here. And my friends were already in fourth year. We haven't even talked in a year. I don't, I was so detached at that point. And so accommodations at that point. So what happened? So first rotation peds, failed the exam. I didn't care. I was fine. I was like, whatever, like, it doesn't define you. I always believe that. I was like, it's a fluke. It's fine. It's okay to fail an exam. I truly believe that. And so so for second rotation, I tried getting help. So I spoke with the school. So part of my accommodations was this support group of physicians that my school has. These are faculty physicians who also went through their own mental health crises during their training. Some of them are addiction, suicide, things like that, so that they understand. So I had that as well because they knew I was only. My school was so good. We had check-ins every time because they knew, Javi, you are a social person. We know you value that. They tried so hard to push me to be more that, right? And then I failed the second exam. And that pissed me off because I thought I was doing everything so well. I was checking in. My U World was getting better. I had the same confidence I had going into step one, which I was very confident in. And my school even gave me an extra week and a half to study for it because they knew I was so anxious about failing. So everything was there. I took the exam. I'll be honest. I walked out thinking I honored. I never thought that. I was like, hell yeah, like this is working. I did it. And then I failed. And it's like, what else do I do? I've done everything. I've done it all, the self-reflection, study skills, everything. You cannot say something I haven't done. I was on medication. I had all my medications adjusted. Constantly, everyone was on call for me. I was taking advantage of every opportunity, and that still wasn't enough. So then why was that not enough, you might ask? When I look, that's still something I still think about, and I think it's not the matter of that I wasn't supported. I think the matter is that it really comes down to I just lost myself, and it really comes down to that identity shift. Versus, I saw myself as Javi, the person who loved helping people, the most fun person you'll ever meet, who's always smiling, and who genuinely loves helping people, and found medicine to be an avenue to do that to fulfill him both personally and academically. But then fast forward to when I was just the medical student. I had gained 60 pounds during Step 1 Dedicated. My eye bags were, while be it very designer, they were very ugly. I hated looking at myself in the mirror. I looked so disheveled. I would go days without washing my scrubs. I would wear the same scrub for 2 weeks straight, sleep in the same scrub, everything, because I said, why do I care? Why do I care? I just have to study. My butt was always glued to my chair, always on UWorld. I would have to wake up every morning and go to sleep every morning crying, just thinking about studying. And it's like, at some point, I think, what else can I even think about except just studying? And I hated it. I just hated it so much. And so, if I had to give advice on that regard to someone, it would be this. It's more so like, it's okay to just not study, first of all. Like, I know that's the hardest concept. And I don't say that facetiously. I know that's such a hard concept to grasp when you're in medical school. It's a guilt, it's a pervasive guilt that we experience, right? But it's okay to make that, even if it hurts, like just actively say, I'm not going to do this. I don't care. I don't care if I feel stupid tomorrow. I don't care. But today I'm not gonna feel stupid. Today I'm gonna feel myself. Whatever that it feels, you have to feel it. And also, like, again, like, God forbid, like, I'm sorry, sometimes, and then I'll end my rant. Sometimes just reach out to medical student. Here's the thing, as you brought up earlier, we all go through it, but we don't talk about it, right? Because we're afraid of what people are gonna say. I promise you, if you go to someone and just say, I hate this, they're gonna be like, oh, same. And that's it. And that's it. But we're not told to do that. That's the annoying part. We're not given that permission, but I'll end my rant there.
That's totally understandable. And when you shared your experience when you were presenting the case, I definitely have that had that experience too. I remember when one of my rotations that was, I would say, a little bit of a toxic rotation. I was presenting a case to the attending, and I presented it really well. But the attending just kind of didn't say a word, turned his head, looking at the resident and saying, "Can you present a case to me?" And
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
kind of thinking to myself, why did I even, waste my breath on this
Like,
for
why try?
the
Why do we
last?
try?
And then before that, I was practicing so much to present the case very well. And then I was like, huh, then, my whole morning went to waste for this. So I definitely understand that. What you said about A lot of medical students, other medical students experiencing the same thing. It is so true. It's just that if you have a very close circle and you talk to them, they're all stressed, especially during the exams,
Oh,
when you
yes.
have the exams at the end of the year and you have to have the school has to have a certain pass rate. I remember when we had our mock exams, almost half of the class failed it, so they send almost half of the class to this boot camp campus for 2 months during the summer or 1 month during the summer to just study, and they had to pay extra for this, to study, and then so to pass the next mock exam so they can take the actual osteopathic test. So it is very stressful, and sometimes even your summer, I mean, your summer is gone,
Yeah.
your weekends or holidays are gone, so it's really your life is gone for those years. And then
Yeah.
residency doesn't even get better, unfortunately. When felt that this is not working and the problem was really medicine, how did you figure out the next steps? Like after leaving med school, what did you take time off? What did you do exactly right afterwards
Yeah, no, I mean, that's,
in
you know,
the
that's
immediate time?
no, exactly. Yeah, no, definitely. And that's, big question. I was asked by everyone. So what next? So what happens next? And, I was asked that question by my parents when I left the hospital. They're like, so what's going to happen now? And my answer to them and to everyone was this, and it would have been the same to you. I would have said, I don't know. I have no idea. I have no plan B or plan Z. I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I know I'm going to find it. I know I'm gonna find it because I've always found everything I wanted. And I told my parents, I was like, I know there's that random thing out there in the world I have no idea exists. There's that random position, that random thing that's just gonna be the right one, and that's okay. And I told my parents, and I don't regret any of this because my medical journey gave me exactly what I wanted, and it is who I am today. And that's why, like, I'm going to answer your question, obviously, but, that was why I felt fine not knowing. But immediately I had to get to work. That's for sure. After the honeymoon phase, I was obviously miserable. And then I was like, no, I don't have time. I don't have time. I have to get to work. So I started applying for jobs. And how did I do that? So right away I went through like, okay, what's all my activities I went through medical school? Because when I was in medical school and thinking residency, I thought, okay, pass fail no rank curriculum, pass fail step one, perfect. I hate studying, but I'm good at everything else. So I made sure to choose activities that were very unique to me and positioned me very well, because I thought even if I don't go to residency, because I always knew that was a possibility, always, no matter what, this will help me in one way. So therefore, I took my experiences and I thought, what does this mean? Like, how can I translate this to a job? So I started thinking, like, what kind of jobs kind of reflect what I did? Some examples were like DEI stuff. I was one of two students in our school's DEI committee at the time. This is in Texas. This is before things happened. but I was in a lot of kind of like public facing initiatives that I enjoyed. So long story short, I found job descriptions. I was a really good writer as well. So I just leveraged my experiences to that. Also, I also approach it this way. I'm like, well, I mean, I wrote really good essays during medical school. And I thought, I mean, I feel like if you get into medical school, that's a pretty big achievement, right? So I thought, let me just tackle this resume and cover letter like they're an essay and a secondary essay. Because I just thought, I'm just making an argument using my experiences, right? And I even then translated, like, I always add this in a resume, in a cover letter. So if anyone wants this advice, I'd be like, while I decided to transition away from medicine, I'm still devoted to a path focused on helping people, whatever stuff. But that's how also you make that argument. And I was really fortunate. So I quit in September 2023. I got a job offer at Oregon State University as a youth program director in October of 2023. And I moved to Oregon mid November to start my new career here at Oregon. Um, so that's how I did that immediately. But then, long story short, I resigned in February of 2024. Why? Because on paper it was a perfect job, but obviously, as I just outlined, I was still stressed because all I was thinking was, I can't fail again. This is my last shot I have. I don't know what else I can do. So imagine that. Not only did I just abandon, so to say, the last 10 years of my life, right? Physically, even, I left everyone back home in Texas. I moved to Oregon by myself, drove 20 hours in 3 days, and I was just alone. And then I'm thinking, I don't want to mess up. So obviously, even the soft skills, I was just abhorrent. I was messing things up. I couldn't even do the actual good stuff I wanted to do. But then what happened? I got sick. I called it stress induced anorexia. I was pooping nonstop. I was vomiting nonstop. One day I'm on the toilet and I'm blacking out, thinking, am I about to die? And I realized, no, you fool. You just have no blood sugar because you haven't eaten in days. And then so for a few days, for weeks, I was just living off of frozen fruit and sugar water because that's all I could stomach. And that's when I realized I'm losing my life over a job again. And I thought, never again. We're never going to do that ever again. And that's when I resigned. I was like, this is not worth my health. It's okay. We're going to keep figuring this out. And I fortunately had a very good contact, through social media, through marketing. So that's how I transitioned to that career. But then I was, then that, I guess leveraged my experiences in medical school as a, social media content creator in the space. So that was very, that was very opportune for me. But then I transitioned away recently because while I love the job allowed me to really process a lot more. It really allowed me to process my whole journey, actually, which I really enjoyed and I'm grateful for. But then I got to a point where I'm like, what's the substance? How am I helping someone? How can I, for me, ethically do something that's actually going to help someone in their life? And it's not that I was missing medicine. That's not the case, but I was missing that thing. And then one day I just decided I felt comfortable looking again in the healthcare space because that's another thing. When I left medicine, I did not want healthcare. I did not want anything to know about it. Because why? You think of a lot of things. And it's not a bad, like, it's not a narcissistic or conceited thing, but it's like my mom was suggesting, oh, like, what about like a radiology tech? My mom has no education. So to my mom, like, of course she sees that as like a big deal, right? And it is. But we understand that the depth of education required is very stark in difference, right? And so I was like, telling my mom, I was like, I just took the hardest exam of science in the world, and I was in a cardiology elective, and I'm not going to sit through some modules about the left side of the heart versus the right side of the heart. And it's not that I belittled that; it's more so I was in such a vulnerable state mentally that any little thing was just a reminder of how much I hated the system that I was in. Up until now, when I realized, no, I can actually think about this again. And then one day, I look into like the mental health space, and I'm like, wait, these jobs exist? Wait, this is cool. And I just got so excited. I'm looking at these jobs and I'm like looking at, well, I'm like, behavioral health, what the hell is that? And then I'm like, and then I see these jobs and I'm like, this specific one, the behavioral one, I'm like, well, this seems like everything I wanted to be as a physician, because what is it? I create treatment plans or behavioral modification plans, right? How do I do that? Interviewing the patient, interviewing family, social work, providers, nurses, everything, which is that not the same that a doctor does? Does the doctor not round every day and get the full picture to create, because the doctor isn't the boss either, right? The doctor is part of a team. Yes, the doctor has the role of a leader, but a doctor should integrate, right? To which I'm like, well, is that not the same thing? Also, I don't have to take tests. That's like the best part. I don't have to take any tests. That's crazy. But my more serious sense, it was really, I also just found my new job that direction. I know you asked me for more media, but I just kind of just wanted to just kind of flesh out the full journey on how I really went, professionally, because I know when people are listening, they're thinking, well, how can I even how can I, let's say I were to quit, what actions can I take? To which I would say, well, first assess what have you done? First of all, you got into medical school. Like there is a lot of weight. Even if right now you're hating it, you still did a lot. And that carries a lot of weight too. Like that's not a badge of defeat. If you tell people out in the real world, as we call it, you tell them I went to medical school, they're like, oh shit. Like, and if you tell them you quit, it's weird. They respect you more. Like they really lean into it. They're like, wait, you quit? Oh, why? And if you're just honest about it, they resonate with that so much more, I've noticed. So that's just a tip. And my point is, if you want something immediately, or let's say you're considering, and you're like, how can I even look at? Well, first, look at different jobs. Doesn't matter which ones, just look at options and then think, how can my experiences maybe translate to that?
We're going to pause here for this week, but don't go too far. We'll be back for part 2 next week, and we'll tune into the rest of the conversation. Thank you.